Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Motel. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with a group of 6 men and women traveling to a remote hotel. Legend has it that 30 years ago, this was the site of a shocking series of murders that horrified the nation. A killer in a bull-horned mask murdered 8 guests in succession, dismembering them and preparing them into various dishes. When the police arrived, they not only found numerous severed limbs in the trash, but also discovered signs of a bloody ritual in the basement. The case caused a massive sensation at the time and was even adapted into a major motion picture. Due to the limited investigative techniques of the era, the killer was never found. That is, until a few months ago, when 2 female entrepreneurs bought the hotel and transformed it into a crime-themed tourist resort. They perfectly recreated every detail of the original crime scene and invited 6 guests for a free experience, hoping they would help generate publicity. The group is composed of unique individuals: a male blogger who personally survived a massacre, the actress from the movie about the murders, a criminal psychology professor, an artist whose work explores the theme of death, a psychic who claims he can communicate with the dead, and a flight attendant famous for having slept with serial killers. The hotel is situated in a remote mountain village with no cell service, and the landline hasn't been connected yet. That's a textbook setup for a slasher story. While the others excitedly discuss how to spend the weekend, only the actress, Peggy, seems pensive, wandering down the hallway. She vividly recalls the scenes from when she filmed the movie there years ago. At dinner time, the owner introduces a special chef who is pathologically obsessed with the decades-old murders. He has prepared a unique feast for them. As the guests uncover their plates, they all gasp in shock. The chef proudly explains that he has perfectly recreated the human menu from the original crime, based on police files. He assures them that the lifelike body parts are actually meticulously sculpted from meat and tofu. Faced with such a morbidly themed meal, some guests excitedly take photos while others can't hide their disgust. To be fair, the food tastes surprisingly good. However, a blood-red drink has a strange flavor. Someone asks what it's made of. The chef smiles, holds out his arm, and reveals that 85% of it is his own blood. Everyone turns pale with horror, yelling that he must be insane. The chef, however, sees it as a simple warm-up for the sacrificial ritual to come. The male blogger, Blake, finds this unacceptable and declares his intention to leave the twisted event. Suddenly, a frantic knocking at the door interrupts the chaos. A rain-soaked couple enters, explaining that the storm has blocked their way and asking to stay for the night. The 2 female owners are reluctant as they don't want outsiders disrupting their carefully planned event. The man explains that they have an RV and only need to rest in the parking lot for the night. The owners impatiently agree and then lead their guests on a tour of the rooms. To create the ultimate atmosphere of terror, they hired the death artist to place lifelike statues at each of the original murder sites. After assigning the rooms, the owner hands Peggy a flimsy nightgown, telling her she will play the role of the victim in the pentagram during the evening's ritual. Peggy is clearly displeased. During a break, she slips out of the hotel in the rain and finds the couple in their RV. After some hesitation, Peggy reveals her purpose. She deeply regrets participating in this disgusting event and wants to leave with them in their RV once the rain stops. The RV couple expresses their own revulsion at the commercialization of murder and readily agrees to her request. After their conversation, Peggy hurries out of the RV. Suddenly, a dark figure flashes before her. The legendary bull-horned killer has appeared to flex his mask. Before she can react, a flash of steel cuts the coffee cup in her hand in 2. Terrified, Peggy flees into the woods for her piggy life, only to trip on a root. As the killer approaches, she screams in despair and in a pig voice. Suddenly, someone yells, "Cut!" from the bushes. It turns out to be a stunt orchestrated by the female owners, designed to capture a victim's genuine fear for promotional material. The others feel this is inappropriate, but the owner points out that the contract explicitly states that in exchange for free lodging, all content produced during their stay belongs to the hotel. Feeling tricked, the guests can't say much more. However, when they learn that Peggy is receiving extra payment for her participation, resentment spreads through the group. The chef is particularly vocal, mocking Peggy as a washed-up star while he, who cooked an elaborate meal, receives nothing. Seeing no remorse from the owners, the chef declares that he's leaving this godforsaken place as soon as the rain stops. After showering and putting on a robe, the chef finds the flight attendant lying on his bed. He just scoffs, uninterested in her sexy body, and heads straight for the hotel's sauna. Through the steam-filled glass door, he sees a figure wearing a bull-horned mask. Assuming it's another one of the owner's staged performances, he scoffs at the figure, saying he's not falling for it. The masked person outside remains silent, locks the door, and turns the sauna's temperature to its maximum setting. After some time, the chef feels an unbearable heat, sweat pouring from his skin like rain. He stumbles to his feet to get some air, only to find the door is locked. Realizing something is wrong, he screams to be let out, but his cries echo unheard in the empty hallway. No one is coming to open the door. The others are in the basement, participating in a sacrificial ritual, a key element of the murders 30 years ago. The ceremony is led by the psychic from the group. Peggy lies in the center of a hexagram while the others form a circle around her. The psychic boasts that he will summon the vengeful spirits of the murder victims. After a great deal of chanting, nothing happens. The psychic frowns, stating that the ritual failed because a key participant is missing, leaving the energy field incomplete. The owners realize the chef isn't there. One of the owners, the brunette, storms off to the sauna, only to let out a terrified chicken scream. The others rush over to find the chef lying inside, unresponsive. The artists prise open the door, and a wave of heat billows out. As the steam clears, they discover the master chef has been cooked possibly by himself. He has steamed to death. The collagen from his skin melted onto the floor. It seems very tasty. Everyone is stunned, wondering how their immersive experience turns into a real murder scene. Their first thought is that it's a stunt planned by the owners. The two owners frantically deny it, arguing that a real death would ruin the hotel's reputation. Blake, unconvinced, grabs an owner's phone to check it, but finds nothing suspicious. Now, genuine panic sets in. They want to call the police, but there's no signal, and the phone line is dead. The lady who arrived in the RV suggests a viable plan. Everyone should pile into their RV and escape this place. But just as she finishes speaking, a loud explosion is heard outside. Her RV has been blown to onion pieces. With their only escape route destroyed, everyone despairs. In the back of the group, the RV couple share a meaningful smile. It is revealed that they are the very same murderers from 30 years ago, now returned to the scene of their crimes to continue their bloody ritual. What they didn't expect was that someone else had beaten them to it by killing the chef. They don't care who the killer is. The wife is more concerned about their motive. She wonders if it's a twisted copycat or another cultist trying to perform their own ritual. The thought makes the RV couple anxious. They must complete their ritual this time and are determined to find the killer who is interfering with their plans. Outside, the guests are arguing fiercely. They suspect the hotel owners, believing the RV explosion was also part of a prearranged script. The blonde owner tearfully explains that she and her partner invested $700,000 to renovate the hotel. She asks who would risk their life savings just to play a murder game. She then leaves with her partner, the brunette owner, and they head to the sauna. As the owners, they can't just leave a body to rot and now face the problem of how to dispose of it. Meanwhile, the psychic quietly approaches the criminal psychology professor, confessing that he is overwhelmed by a sense of foreboding. He plans to escape the murderous hotel under the cover of night. The professor admires his courage, noting that the mountain path is known to be the killer's hunting ground, and not everyone would dare to make that journey. The professor gives the psychic his raincoat as a small contribution. However, unknown to the psychic, as soon as he steps outside, he is spotted by the killer couple. The husband pulls out a knife ready to pursue him, but the wife stops him, reminding him that their ritual requires the blood of 9 people. The RV husband nods and disappears into the night with his smelly butt. As the psychic walks alone on the forest path, a wolf suddenly leaps from the bushes. He freezes, his back drenched in sweat. The RV man, who was hiding nearby, is forced to reveal himself. He throws a rock to scare away the wolf and warns the psychic that there are bears in the area, advising him to return to the hotel. The psychic is about to refuse when he feels the murderous intent in the RV man's eyes, as if refusing would mean his death. As they stand in a silent standoff, the professor calls out from behind them. With a third person present, the tension dissipates. The psychic seizes the opportunity and abandons his plan to leave, deciding to wait until morning. Back at the hotel, the psychic tells the professor about the RV man's strange behavior, suggesting he might be the hidden killer. The professor is skeptical, arguing that if the RV man were the killer, he could have killed them both in the woods. The psychic remains convinced and warns the professor to stay vigilant. But no one could have predicted that the next victim would be the blonde hotel owner. Shortly after, the brunette owner wakes up to find that her partner's heart has been ripped out. She lets out a series of horrified screams. The other guests rush in and are stunned by the bloody scene. Blake tries to comfort her using his flirty muscles, but the psychic points the finger at the brunette owner. He questions how the blonde owner could be dead like pieces of shit, while she, who slept in the same bed, is unharmed. He then finds a bloody long knife under the bed, declaring it to be the murder weapon. The brunette owner frantically shakes her head, insisting her partner was already dead when she woke up, but no one believes her smelly bullshit. They argue that killing someone and removing their heart would make a lot of noise, impossible to sleep through. The brunette owner explains that she took a sleeping pill and slept very soundly, claiming the killer must be trying to frame her. But her explanation seems weak. The psychic suggests they tie the brunette owner up to prevent her from harming anyone else. The memory of the chef's gruesome death is still fresh, and no one wants to be next. Peggy sees the brunette owner's despair and tries to speak up for her, but the psychic sharply warns that anyone who defends her will be considered an accomplice. Soon, the others lead Peggy out of the room, leaving the brunette owner tied up, wailing in anguish beside her dead partner. The original serial killers, the RV couple, are once again bewildered. They didn't kill the blonde owner or the chef. It seems that 30 years after their last spree, they have become mere spectators at a new feast of slaughter. The thought makes the husband increasingly anxious, wondering what if their little lambs escape by morning. At this point, the only person who seems to be thinking rationally is the psychology professor. He finds the psychic alone and tells him that his judgment was too hasty. He points out that the brunette owner has no motive to kill, and her reaction did not seem fake. The professor explains that he didn't intervene earlier because tying the brunette owner up seemed like the best course of action at the time, and they could let the police sort it out later. He sternly warns the psychic that he has neither the right to judge nor to enforce the law, and that he must ensure the brunette owner's safety. Meanwhile, the brunette owner, tied up, stares at her partner's mutilated body. While trying to free herself, she recalls recent events. After the chef's death, she and her partner had faced a storm of accusations from the guests. The partner had been deeply upset, even regretting investing in the theme hotel. It was the brunette owner's obsession with the murder case that had driven her partner to pour her life savings into the venture. Now it all seemed like a rash decision. Feeling wronged, the brunette owner had stormed out. Later, when she went to apologize to her partner, she found her partner fast asleep, having taken a sleeping pill. The brunette owner sighed, took a pill herself, and went to bed. In the middle of the night, the sound of dripping water from the leaky roof woke her. She groggily nudged her partner, but got no response. When she turned on the light, she saw her mangled body. Now, not wanting to be framed for murder, the brunette owner works tirelessly and finally breaks free from her restraints. Peeking through the door, she sees someone guarding it. Fortunately, having been involved in the hotel's renovation, she knows about a ventilation duct under the floorboards in the corner. She pries open the metal grate and carefully crawls inside. However, the old duct breaks under her heavy weight, and she falls into the pitch-black basement. The noise alerts everyone in the hotel. They follow the sound and discover the brunette owner has escaped. The thought of a crazed killer on the loose is terrifying. Everyone grabs a knife from the kitchen and follows the ventilation duct to the basement. The space is small, giving the brunette owner nowhere to hide. She jumps out, holding a knife to Peggy's throat, desperately pleading her innocence. The RV man ignores her pleas and lunges at her from the side. The flight attendant seizes the opportunity to slash her knife-wielding arm. With the brunette owner disarmed, the enraged group swarms her, stabbing her repeatedly until she stops moving. Only 3 of the guests did not participate in the violence. Peggy thinks the others have gone mad. The psychology professor believes the psychic is intentionally manipulating everyone's behavior and speculates that one of the 3 of them could be next, as they were the only ones who didn't join the mob. In fact, the professor's guess is spot on. The group that participated in the killing has grown noticeably closer, especially under the subtle guidance of the RV couple. They praise the act as heroic and a way to release inner stress. Blake feels some guilt after all, they killed a living person. But the psychic insists it was self-defense, and remarks meaningfully that they are all in the same boat now. As a light rain begins to fall, the RV lady stands anxiously by the window. Dawn is approaching, and they must act quickly. Having personally participated in the brunette owner's murder, the violent urges the RV man has suppressed for years begin to resurface. He volunteers to take out a target. He solemnly dons his signature bull-horned mask. Before he leaves, his wife recites a blessing in the name of the demon Baphomet. The RV man silently approaches the psychic's room. As he waits for the right moment to strike, he hears the snap of a twig behind him. He turns to see another masked figure, dressed exactly like him, standing in the darkness. The two killers draw their knives and attack each other without hesitation. When the impostor finds himself unable to gain the upper hand, he suddenly turns and flees into the forest. The RV man gives chase, but the impostor executes a swift counterattack, slashing his back with a sharp blade. Just in the nick of time, a flare shoots through the air. The wife has arrived as backup. The impostor quickly disappears into the woods. Back in their room, the wife carefully tends to her husband's wound. He frowns, noting that the impostor's skills were on par with his own, suggesting a well-trained man. In this isolated hotel, he wonders who could be hiding their abilities and posing as the killer. In the dead of night, the psychic is jolted awake by a faint beckoning voice. Grabbing a dagger, he follows the sound to the basement. His expression becomes ecstatic. He wonders if it's the spirit of a victim trying to send him a message. In the candlelight, he notices several nails on the floor that weren't there before. As he puzzles over them, a hammer strikes his head, and he collapses. He is conscious, but unable to move. He sees the masked killer holding the hammer, picking up a nail and positioning it against his skull. With each strike of the hammer, the nail sinks into his scalp and disappears. The psychic feels no pain, but his thoughts uncontrollably drift back 10 years. At that time, he had gone to the local police station and, in front of the sheriff, insisted on reopening the cold case. He claimed that after years of investigation, he had a crucial piece of information. The sheriff asked how he knew, but the psychic, averting his gaze, didn't dare admit he had obtained it through a seance. He had snuck into the basement of the murder hotel, lit some candles, and sat cross-legged, chanting. After inhaling the rising smoke, he felt a dizzying sensation and saw a blurry figure crawling towards him. As it got closer, he recognized it as Catherine, one of the victims of the original massacre. Forcing down his fear, the psychic asked who killed her. Catherine's voice was hoarse as she struggled to form words, but her last sentence was clear. The killer's goal was to summon the demon Baphomet, and they had recently returned to the crime scene. The psychic treasured this clue, never considering that the ghost might have been a hallucination from the smoke. Using police files, he quickly identified a suspect, a homeless man who had been seen lurking near the hotel and owned a large collection of books about Baphomet. During interrogation, the man insisted he only started researching the topic after the murders occurred. When the sheriff was about to release him due to lack of evidence, the psychic proposed a cruel tactic. Since the man was a Baphomet follower, they should belittle his contributions to the demon and threaten that Baphomet himself would drag him to hell. The words hit the suspect like a bombshell. He turned pale and hysterically demanded to know how the sheriff knew these things. In a state of extreme terror, while screaming his innocence, the man began to bite his own wrist. Soon after, the homeless man collapsed and died to meet Satan, enjoying a free home in hell. The irony was that the very next day, the police found an airtight alibi for the homeless man. The sheriff angrily blamed the psychic, saying his strange ideas had killed an innocent person. This incident reveals the psychic's own pathological obsession with the case, clouding his judgment with clear bias. The homeless man became an unfortunate victim then, just as the brunette owner had now. In his final moments, the psychic feels a flicker of regret, but it's too late for him to make amends. The image of victim Catherine appears again, complaining that he has failed her. Not only did he not find the real killer, but he has now become a sacrifice himself, hastening the opening of Hell's Gate. Meanwhile, the sleeping guests are awakened by a faint gasping sound. They make their way to the basement and find the psychic barely alive. 8 nails have been driven into his head. He's still breathing but can't make a sound. His lips tremble as he tries to speak, but no one can understand him. The remaining guests are frantic, including him. This is the 4th victim of the night. Blake's back is slick with cold sweat. He wants out of this place immediately and suggests they team up and head down the mountain. The psychology professor objects, pointing out that it's too dark to see the path and there are wild animals in the woods. The RV man ignores Blake, muttering about how to dispose of the body, remarking that they'll need to clear another spot in the freezer. The artist takes a photo with his phone and then expertly helps the RV man carry the body. The wife comments meaningfully that he seems to have carried a lot of bodies before. After everything that has happened, the professor and Peggy have grown closer. Peggy is lost in the mystery of it all. The chef boiled to death, the hotel owner whose heart was removed for her supposed lack of responsibility, and the psychic nailed to death. The killings seem meticulously planned. Both worried and curious, she wonders what her death would be like if it were her turn. By now, the artist has moved the psychic's body to the walk-in freezer. He happens to notice blood seeping through the back of the RV man's shirt and assumes it's from the corpse. The RV man feels mocked and insults the artist's art, calling it trash. The artist scoffs and leaves. As the RV man is about to follow, he hears a faint whimper. He turns to see that the psychic is still alive. He tries to ask who the killer is but can't make out a single word. With a grim expression, the RV man places his hands around the psychic's neck and squeezes. With that, the psychic finally breathes his last. Now he can truly speak with the dead. High on the thrill of the kill, the RV man finds his wife to share his joy. It's only when he's killing that he feels like his old self. The wife's eyes gleam as she speculates that the artist is the most likely suspect for the other killer. The RV man agrees, adding that the artist might have noticed his wound in the freezer. Out of caution, the wife decides to probe the artist further. She finds him engrossed in his work. This room was the scene of the fourth murder 30 years ago, where the bull-horned killer not only murdered the guest, but also artfully arranged the body to resemble a biblical sacrifice. The artist is struggling to capture the scene, feeling something is missing. He finally decides to mix real blood into the red paint to make it look more authentic. The RV lady is stunned, thinking that creative types are truly unhinged. When the artist suggests she contribute some of her own blood, she curses him under her breath but complies. The scene reminds her of her past. 30 years ago, her father died in an accident at a sweatshop and received no compensation. While causing a disturbance at a church, she met the RV man. From then on, they became Satanists. Disillusioned with the world, she decided to perform an ancient ritual to summon a demon to cleanse the earth. The RV man was equally interested and helped with the preparations, which included a blood sacrifice. For this, she killed their neighbor's cat. Back in the present, the RV lady's expression is complex. She wonders if the artist is also secretly preparing for some kind of ritual. She is now almost certain he is the hidden killer. With a few hours left until dawn, the remaining guests are too afraid to sleep and are huddled in the main hall. Peggy is deeply unsettled. In all the movies she's been in, the characters who try to survive always end up dead. The professor, not wanting the group to sink into despair, recalculates the distance to the nearest town, estimating it would take about 15 hours on foot. He suggests they pack some food and water. The RV man tries to dissuade them, asking why they don't just wait for rescue and reminding them of the wild animals on the path. The artist retorts sharply, asking if they'd rather face a deranged killer or a simple animal. The RV man persists, arguing that the killer is among them, so leaving together doesn't mean they're safe. Blake agrees with leaving, reasoning that if they all stick together, the killer won't have a chance to strike. The professor stands up and announces that everyone should go pack, and they will meet in the hall in an hour. After the others leave, the artist gives the killer couple a knowing look. The RV man curses under his breath, wanting to kill him on the spot. His wife stops him, pointing out that doing so would only make the others leave faster. The RV man feels helpless, wondering if they'll have to hunt their sheep in the forest. The scene shifts. The women have more to pack and are taking longer. The others, already prepared, gather at the hotel entrance. The professor notices something hanging from a tree. Upon closer inspection, it's the psychic's head. As he and the artist are about to go back inside, the masked killer appears. The artist roars like a goose and charges like a chicken, but he's no match for the killer. At a critical moment, the professor draws a dagger, shoves the struggling artist aside, and kicks the masked figure to the ground. As they try to retreat to the hotel, the killer's blade slashes the professor's abdomen. The artist drags him back inside and slams the door shut. Peggy rushes out of her room and helps the injured professor back to his. The RV lady shouts nervously in the hallway, but she's actually providing cover for her husband. The bull-horned killer was him. In the next room, Peggy is bandaging the professor's wound. An air of intimacy has developed between them. It seems extreme environments foster affection quickly. Suddenly, the door is pushed open, and Blake enters with a grim expression. He demands to see Peggy's shoes. It had rained earlier, so whoever has wet shoes must be the killer. When Peggy hesitates, Blake becomes agitated. The professor tries to argue for her, but Peggy hands over her shoes. Once she's cleared, Blake rushes to the next room to inspect the killer couple's shoes. The RV man doesn't tolerate this and with a volley of shouts and curses frightens Blake into tears. Blake explains he's just scared of being murdered. The RV lady, much calmer, presents both her and her husband's shoes. The dry soles clear them of suspicion. After closing the door, the RV man looks relieved. No one knows he brought multiple pairs of shoes. The artist, a sharp thinker, points out that there are only 4 men left. Since he and the professor just fought the masked killer, they can rule out Blake based on the killer's build. This leaves the RV man as the most likely suspect. The wife stares at the artist, realizing that by saying this, he must be planning to run immediately. Back in his room, the RV man is clearly anxious. It's time to cull the flock. His wife stares out the window, silent, her thoughts drifting back to that night 30 years ago. Their carefully prepared summoning ritual had failed. After extensive research, she found the reason. Such a ritual required perfect cosmic alignment. Saturn, the most powerful planet, takes 30 years to orbit the sun. A new cycle was beginning in a few weeks, providing the optimal time to open a gate to hell and summon demon Baphomet. To amplify the power, they also needed to find a place where ley lines converged, a nexus of energy. They needed to be at that nexus when Saturn was in position with the blood of 6 people to ensure their ritual would succeed. Coincidentally, the ley line nexus was the Hell Hotel, the site of the original murders. For some reason, that ritual failed too. So the couple waited 30 years for Saturn to align again. They would not miss this final chance. Meanwhile, the artist has finished packing. As he's about to leave, the RV man slowly enters his room. The artist seems prepared and throws a punch, but another figure suddenly appears behind him, the RV lady holding a knife. Caught off guard, the artist is stabbed in the abdomen. As he falls, the RV couple expertly finishes the job, one covering his smelly mouth while the other repeatedly stabs him. The unfortunate artist soon lies in a pool of blood, his breathing stopped. At the same time, the sexy flight attendant knocks and enters Blake's room. The two had slept together the previous day and were closer than the others. However, Blake is in no mood for romance now. The flight attendant snaps at him, asking what he takes her for. With death just outside the door, her legs are still shaking. She just wants some company to feel safer. Blake nods, suggesting a game of cards rather than a hormone yoga is the best distraction. When she doesn't object, he leaves the room to find a deck. At that moment, the artist is still clinging to life. The reflection of the bull-horned killer's mask shimmers in his pooling blood. The killer kneels and dips a finger in the blood, drawing a cross on the artist's forehead. Elsewhere, Blake returns to the room, apologizing to the flight attendant for taking so long to find cards. She nods, not thinking much of it, lost in her own guilt. She deeply regrets her part in the attack on the brunette owner, and can't imagine how desperate the brunette owner must have felt. With the appearance of the bull-horned killer, the theory that the brunette owner was the murderer is now debunked. Meanwhile, as the professor walks down the hall, he notices blood seeping from under a door. He pushes it open to find the artist's body, which has been arranged into a grotesque and beautiful mural. The artist had a passion for performance art, and in death, he has been turned into one. The combination of beauty and death creates a powerful visual contrast. The 6 remaining survivors are speechless, wondering what the killer's motive could be. Perhaps it's just to satisfy some twisted aesthetic. They finally make it to morning, but the rain is falling harder than ever, making it impossible to leave. However, because of their isolation, the professor is certain the killer is one of the 6 of them. He suggests they all share their thoughts, hoping to deduce the killer's identity. But the others are too disturbed by the artist's bizarre death to offer any valuable insights. Then the RV man speaks up. He believes each murder has a specific meaning, especially those of the psychic, the hotel owner, and the artist, whose deaths correspond to the biblical themes of salvation, sin, and repentance. He notes that this is almost identical to the murders 30 years ago and suggests the killer is either imitating or recreating that event. His words send a chill down everyone's spine all the way to their smelly butts. The flight attendant suddenly gasps, pointing to a figure standing outside the window, possibly the bull-horned killer. Everyone grabs a weapon and heads into the woods. Behind a tree, they find the figure. The RV man tackles him to the ground, but his identity shocks everyone. It's the elderly driver of the luxury car that brought them to the hotel. After dropping them off, he had started back to town but was caught in the storm. The road was washed out and his car overturned. He had no choice but to walk back to the hotel for help, only to be mistaken for the killer. When he learns that 5 people have died overnight, he is desperate to leave. When the others refuse to let him go, he pulls out a handgun, which immediately calms the situation. The women offer to tend to the driver's wounds, while the men gather in the hall to discuss what to do. Blake thinks the driver is lying, questioning how an injured old man could have made it through the beast-infested woods. When the others remain silent, he makes a decision. They will lock the driver in the woodshed outside. Unfortunately, the women overhear their conversation. They think the men's judgment is too hasty. The flight attendant, who prides herself on her knowledge of serial killers, is adamant that the driver's behavior was genuine, not an act. In a fit of chauvinism, the RV man says a woman like her has no right to an opinion and even insults her smelly part and her family. This ignites a full-blown conflict between the men and women, with everyone shouting insults. Amid the chaos, the flight attendant snatches the driver's gun and fires a warning shot. Now armed, she speaks with authority. She believes the killer is one of the men, citing that 85% of serial killers are male. To increase their chances of survival, she proposes that the men and women separate. That way, if the killer strikes, the men will be the first to go. Although her methods are extreme, she gains the support of all the women. After all, everyone's first priority is their own safety. The women gather supplies and lock themselves in a separate room. What the flight attendant and Peggy don't know is that the woman with them, the RV lady, is a ruthless murderer herself. But she shows no sign of it, constantly complaining about how unreasonable her husband is and siding completely with the flight attendant. In just a few minutes, she has bonded with the other two women. In the main hall, the men stare at each other. The driver says the rain has washed out the bridge, meaning rescue won't be coming soon, even after the storm stops. Their hearts sink. At that moment, the professor recalls the morning's analysis and questions how the RV man knew so much about the killer's intentions. Faced with this suspicion, the RV man explains that he had heard about the case long ago and paid special attention to the bull-horned killer's brutal methods. This explanation only raises more red flags for the professor. A normal person would be curious about the killer's identity, not their methods, unless they had a hidden agenda. The flustered man, unable to explain, tries to excuse himself but is blocked by the other three. During the scuffle, the RV man's wound on his back is exposed. The room falls silent. The wound is clearly recent, the kind one might get while committing a murder. The RV man's face darkens. He claims he slipped while carrying a body earlier, but the explanation is weak. The professor interprets his every word as a lie. Finally, the RV man resorts to his fists. The professor is initially beaten badly, but Blake wisely jumps in to help. 2 against 1, they are evenly matched. The driver watches in disbelief, yells that they're all crazy, and runs out of the hall, deciding he's safer with the chicken women. In their room, the 3 women are slightly drunk. The RV lady pulls out a deck of tarot cards, claiming she can tell fortunes. The flight attendant is immediately intrigued and asks for a reading about her love life. She confesses that she's in love with a murderer who brutally killed a woman. Even after being imprisoned, he remains obsessed with his victim and won't give the flight attendant the time of day despite her advances. This rejection deeply affected her, leading to a morbid fascination with all murderers. The RV lady listens impassively and, whether intentionally or not, deals the flight attendant a handful of bad cards, signifying misfortune and death. This pushes the flight attendant over the edge. She refuses to believe she is the killer's next target. Peggy tries to comfort her, but she only becomes more agitated. As a precaution, Peggy tries to take the handgun from the bed. The flight attendant's eyes narrow. She snatches the gun back, convinced Peggy is plotting against her. Sensing the situation spiraling out of control, the RV lady quietly moves towards the door to leave. But just as she moves the chair blocking it, the door is pushed open by the driver. The flight attendant instinctively pulls the trigger. Just like that, the unlucky driver becomes the next victim and sends him to drive for Jesus in heaven. After this incident, the flight attendant is locked up unsurprisingly. Although the professor and Peggy still believe she isn't the hidden killer and that the driver's death was an accident, they agree that for the sake of fairness, she must be punished. They decide to lock her in the woodshed out back until the police arrive. The flight attendant cries, insisting it was an accident and that she is terrified of being alone in enclosed spaces, something Blake should know better than anyone. But at this critical moment, Blake remains indifferent. The flight attendant is left alone, pacing and singing to herself to ward off fear. Huddled in a corner, waiting for time to pass, she notices a glass skylight in the roof. A spark of hope ignites within her. She finds a hammer, smashes the skylight, and climbs out onto the roof. But as she's about to jump down, the bull-horned killer appears behind her. She falls hard to the ground and looks up to see the killer pick up a thick log and bring it down on her. When she wakes up, she's tied to a tree. The bull-horned killer is nearby, seemingly waiting for her to regain consciousness. The flight attendant finally has her chance to be alone with a murderer. Unfortunately, she doesn't find love, only the cold steel of his knife. The sleeping professor is woken by a knock. It's Peggy, who is worried about the flight attendant and wants him to check on her with her. They go to the woodshed together, but the flight attendant is gone without traces of her smell. The tools and broken glass indicate she escaped. However, they notice another set of footprints around the shed. A sense of dread fills them. They follow the footprints into the woods and find the flight attendant's body hanging upside down from a tree. She is already cold. The professor has just carried her body back to the hotel when Blake storms in, brandishing a gun. He has had enough of the killer's rampage and decides to go on the offensive. Using the gun to intimidate them, he ties the 4 remaining survivors to chairs. With only 5 people left, the pool of suspects is much smaller. Blake is certain it's not him, so the killer must be one of the 4 people tied up. They all desperately plead their innocence, each with a plausible reason. But Blake has his own theory. He reasons that Peggy has been useless the whole time, only screaming at her full chicken lungs when trouble arises, making her seem the least suspicious. But this could be a clever disguise. The professor's past is highly suspicious. He spent 3 years writing a dissertation on serial killers. Blake argues that no normal person would study real murder so intensely, making a psychologically twisted person like him the most likely to replicate the crimes. The RV man's suspicion is even greater. He and his wife showed up at the hotel for no clear reason, which is suspicious in itself. Plus, the RV man is a hunter and was previously seen showing murderous intent towards the psychic, a fact that had quietly circulated. As for his wife, she seems very intelligent and calm under pressure. Blake finds it hard to believe someone like her would be married to the hot-tempered husband, suggesting she is deliberately hiding her true personality. Blake, true to his blogger background, presents a sharp analysis, but after all that, he still can't identify the killer. The 4 captives protest that he can't just kill all of them. Overwhelmed, Blake admits he can't, which he claims is proof that he isn't the killer. They all try to calm him down, urging him to rely on evidence. Blake is almost swayed, but then a grim look crosses his face. He says he has personally experienced a murder scene, and a killer on a rampage is worse than any beast. For his own safety, Blake decides to trust his gut. He glares at the husband and declares him the killer. The RV man's lip trembles as Blake pulls out a dagger and stabs him in the back. He screams in pain but still denies being the killer. The RV lady, her face stained with tears, pleads with Blake, asking why he would do this without any proof. Blake's reason is simple. Her husband is a hunter, making him the strongest person there. Perhaps sensing his end is near, the RV man breaks down. He sobs that he has worked hard his whole life and just wanted a quiet retirement with his wife. Seeing the couple's tearful display, Blake puts away his gun and leaves the room. He is not a cold-blooded killer and can't bring himself to murder indiscriminately. Grabbing a bottle of liquor, he downs a few swigs and walks over to the flight attendant's sexy body. Of all the people there, she was the closest to him, which is why her death triggered such an impulsive reaction. He is filled with remorse for failing to protect her. His thoughts drift back to that unforgettable night. Blake was at a party with friends when a masked killer burst in. He tried to call the police, but dropped his phone in panic. Remembering his girlfriend was in the basement, he ran for the stairs. His friend, however, wanted to escape and call for help. In that moment of hesitation, the friend came face to face with the killer. Blake wanted to help, but he knew his own limits and watched as his friend was brutally stabbed. He retreated to the basement. There was no time for grief. Finding his terrified girlfriend in a freezer, Blake promised he would get her out safely. When the noise outside stopped, they crept out of the basement. His friend's body was lying at the foot of the stairs. Suddenly, a scream came from upstairs. Someone else was being attacked. Blake and his girlfriend ran outside, but they saw her best friend screaming for help from a window. His girlfriend, overcome with emotion, ran back towards the house. Blake couldn't stop her and had to follow. They rushed to the second floor to find the killer gone and her best friend with a knife in her abdomen. Delirious, she begged her friend to pull the knife out, thinking it would stop the pain. In a state of shock, his girlfriend actually did it. The moment the knife was removed, blood gushed from the wound, and the friend collapsed, dead within seconds. Then, they heard heavy footsteps outside. Blake realized the killer was coming and pulled his girlfriend under the bed, praying the killer wouldn't see them. His girlfriend was sobbing, consumed by guilt and fear. Blake kept trying to comfort her using sweet words, but their worst fear came true. The footsteps grew closer. His girlfriend saw the killer walk up to the bed. To their horror, the killer knelt down to check. Unexpectedly, they heard the police banging on the door downstairs. The killer immediately fled. Blake and his girlfriend breathed a sigh of relief. Standing up, they saw flashing police lights outside and were overcome with emotion. By now, the police had entered the house and saw the killer holding the bloody knife. An officer fired without hesitation, and the masked killer fell. A moment later, Blake and his girlfriend rushed downstairs. As an officer was checking the killer's identity, he discovered the killer was wearing a bulletproof vest. The next second, the officer's gun was knocked away and his chick throat was slit. Blake was stunned. He tried to escape with his girlfriend by car but couldn't find the keys. The killer was already upon them. They locked the car doors but were now trapped. The killer circled the car, then jumped on the hood and began kicking the windshield. In a desperate move, Blake opened the door and they both tumbled out. After running in circles, they ended up back in the house. Blake hoped the killer might have a change of heart, but his girlfriend charged forward to fight back. With the killer armed, Blake was slashed across the chest and his girlfriend was thrown against a wall. The killer then removed his mask. Blake recognized him but couldn't place the name. The killer's face was twisted with rage as he cursed Blake. They had been high school classmates. Blake and his friends used to bully him, even posting videos online, forcing the killer to live under constant scrutiny until he dropped out and moved away. But years later, the killer could never escape the past and had returned for revenge. Blake vaguely remembered him and, filled with guilt, offered to do anything to make it right. But the killer said it was too late. He grabbed the girl and told Blake that if he wanted to save her, he had to trade his own life. After a moment of hesitation, Blake fled, leaving his girlfriend to her fate. Her dying screams echoed behind him. Remembering this, Blake finally realizes that if he doesn't find the killer, he might end up in that same cowardly position again. Back in the main hall, the four tied-up captives haven't given up. The professor says he has a small utility knife in his pocket. Peggy contorts her body and finally manages to retrieve it and pass it to him. With his hands tied, the professor struggles to get a good grip and has to saw at the ropes slowly. Just as they think they are about to be free, Blake walks back in, his face dark and silent, looking as if he has made a terrible decision. The captives sense the danger and all start pleading with him to stay calm, suggesting he go rest. Blake sneers and lifts his shirt, revealing a gruesome scar, a reminder from the killer all those years ago. He declares that he won't let anyone hurt him again. Panicked, the professor saws at the ropes faster. Blake raises the gun again and slowly aims it at the RV man. At that critical moment, the professor finally cuts through the ropes. He stabs Blake with the small knife. The RV man kicks out, and in the chaos, Blake empties the clip but hits no one. Seeing he has lost control, Blake flees the hotel with his injuries. The others want to give chase, but the RV man stops them, warning that it's dark and dangerous outside. Besides, Blake is injured and will likely bleed out. As long as they lock the doors, they'll be safe. Peggy's conscience acts up again. She is sure Blake isn't the hidden killer and asks if it's cruel to just leave him to die. The killer couple pretends not to hear, eager for him to be gone. Even the professor remains silent. Just as the RV man predicted, Blake is growing weaker. His mind flashes back to the past again. It turns out there was a twist to that night. After running downstairs and hearing his girlfriend's final screams, he had found a surge of courage and ran back up to fight the killer. When the police arrived, Blake had just managed to kill him, but he was too late to save his girlfriend. In the years that followed, Blake told the story of that night over and over, hoping his girlfriend's spirit could forgive his cowardice. Blake stops reminiscing and looks up. He dimly sees a figure approaching. It's the bullhorned killer holding a snowblower. As the machine roars to life, Blake feels a breeze on his face. Amidst a spray of red, Blake is utterly turned into a pile of gore. After driving Blake out, the remaining survivors get a rare night of peaceful sleep. The next morning, the RV lady wakes up to the sunlight, her mood excellent. Today is the day of the ritual she has waited 30 years for. With the blood and flesh of 9 corpses, she can summon the demon Baphomet. Her husband is certain that Blake died outside during the night. They quickly get dressed, ready to retrieve the body. But just as they are leaving, the newly awakened Peggy sees their slightly furtive departure. On the mountain path, the couple finds Blake's jacket, and nearby, a pile of minced meat. A snowblower is parked by the side of the road. They imagine Blake's brutal death and shudder. Just then, Peggy walks up. Seeing the remains, she nearly throws up. The RV man's worried expression is genuine. There is another deranged killer in the hotel. His wife immediately seizes the opportunity. She points out that she was with her husband all night while Peggy and the professor were in separate rooms, making them the most likely suspects. The RV man chimes in, warning Peggy to be careful of the professor. When Peggy doesn't respond, he says he's going back for a cart. The remains on the ground are materials for the ritual and can't be wasted. After dealing with the body, the RV man returns to the hotel. His wife reminds him that they now have 8 bodies, 1 short of the 9 required for the ritual. The hidden killer must be either Peggy or the professor. He can't decide which one to choose as the final sacrifice. The RV man suggests the simplest solution is to kill them both, but the wife shakes her head, explaining that while 9 bodies are a prerequisite, summoning Baphomet also requires a living sacrifice. The man thinks the professor is the bigger threat and proposes they kill him and temporarily placate Peggy. His wife smiles slyly and pulls the demonic grimoire from a drawer. She has a better idea. At lunchtime, while the professor is away, the killer couple begins to manipulate Peggy. They point out that with only 4 survivors left, besides the 3 of them, the professor is the only remaining suspect. Peggy shakes her head, saying that besides herself, she thinks anyone could be the killer. The RV lady reminds Peggy that if she and her husband were the killers, they could have killed her in the woods that morning. Seeing Peggy's hesitation, she proposes a deal. Peggy can search their room, and in return, they get to search her and the professor's rooms. They start with the couple's room, where Peggy finds nothing. The bull-horned killer mask is hidden in a ceiling panel. Next, they do a cursory search of Peggy's room and, finding nothing, quietly move to the professor's. Under the RV lady's subtle guidance, Peggy finds the demonic grimoire, which the lady had planted in a drawer. The murder methods described inside match how the other victims died. Peggy is shocked, wondering if the professor really is the killer. The RV lady presses her advantage, insisting they must eliminate this threat before he kills them. Peggy is still hesitant, as she and the professor are the closest. The lady offers a compromise. There are sleeping pills in the old owner's bedroom. Peggy just needs to drug the professor, and she and her husband will tie him up and wait for the police. After a moment of hesitation, Peggy agrees. After leaving the room, the couple smirks. They can't believe how easily fooled Peggy is. When the professor isn't looking, Peggy secretly pours some powder into his coffee. The storm outside has stopped, and the professor plans to leave that afternoon. Clearly unsuspecting, he drinks the entire cup of coffee. He then warns Peggy to be careful of the RV couple. As he tries to say more, he suddenly feels dizzy. Peggy explains it's just a sleeping pill and that the police might be there when he wakes up. As he passes out, the poor professor's last words are a warning to her that she will be in danger alone. The couple has achieved their goal. To keep Peggy calm, they make a show of tying the professor to the bed. If it were up to the RV man, he would have started hacking at him immediately. But Peggy's mind is not at ease. Even with the professor tied up, her intense sense of dread remains. The RV lady plays the part of a caring friend, trying to soothe Peggy's nerves. She suggests that the best way to relax is a hot bath. Her smile is sinister, as if the suggestion is part of the preparation for the night's ritual. The naive Peggy actually goes to take a bath. She soaks in the tub, drifting in and out of consciousness, when her phone suddenly rings. To her surprise, she has a signal. She immediately calls the police. Meanwhile, the RV man is setting up the ritual site, arranging the remains of 9 bodies in a circle, with an empty space in the middle for Peggy. His wife tells him not to be impatient, that everything is under her control. But Peggy's phone is now connected to the internet. While searching for information on the demonic grimoire, she stumbles upon a photo of the RV lady holding the very same book. She was the true owner all along. Peggy understands everything in an instant. Before she can react, the lady walks into the bathroom. Peggy forces herself to act calm, pretending nothing has happened. The lady uses bath oil to draw a cross on Peggy's forehead, which only increases her panic. Despite her efforts to control it, her body trembles. The RV lady seems to notice something is off and tells her to relax in the water. As Peggy submerges herself, her phone rings again. The RV lady snatches it and sees the photo, realizing her plan has been exposed. The pretense is over. Pushed to the brink, Peggy fights back, targeting her opponent's weak points. During the struggle, she shoves the lady into the bathtub, holding her head underwater with all her might. When she finally stops moving, Peggy collapses onto the floor, gasping for air. But a moment later, an arm shoots out of the tub. The RV lady wasn't dead. Peggy finds another surge of strength, grabs her, and repeatedly slams her head against the tub until the murderess is finally dead. Without a moment to rest, Peggy runs to the professor's room. Realizing she wrongly accused him, she apologizes as she unties him. Peggy tells him she has already called the police and they will be there soon. Meanwhile, the RV man, having finished his preparations, goes upstairs to find his wife, only to discover her dead body. His anguished goose roar echoes through the hotel. Knowing a fight is inevitable, Peggy urges the professor to grab a knife. As they step out of the room, they are met by the RV man, fully armed. Peggy charges first, but is easily swatted aside. The man seems to have a realization, declaring that Peggy must be the hidden killer because her knife skills are too practiced. He exclaims that it's no wonder she could kill his wife on her own. The professor is confused. Peggy, like a cornered animal, curses the RV man. She is injured in the fight. The professor helps her down to the basement. The sight of the dismembered bodies scattered on the floor horrifies them. But the RV man pursues them, praising Peggy as a killer, even better at deception than he is. The professor grabs an iron rod from the wall and swings it. As the two men fight, Peggy lunges forward and stabs the RV man in the back. His eyes glaze over as he mutters, "She's the killer." Enraged, Peggy kicks him over, but the RV man is smiling. He says his dying heart is the final offering, the key to summoning the demon. The professor is completely lost and tries to ask for more details, but Peggy grabs a shovel and, with all her strength, brings it down on the RV man's head. The professor watches, stunned. He never knew Peggy had such a violent side. Just to be sure, he calls the police to confirm. A report was indeed filed a few hours ago, and officers will be there in the morning. The two of them lie in bed all night without performing a hormone yoga session. The next day, the professor wakes up and notices what looks like blood seeping from the ceiling. He stands on a chair, removes the ceiling panel, and finds a bloody heart. He suddenly remembers the RV man's dying words about the demon sacrifice needing one more heart. He wonders if Peggy put it there. He quickly replaces the panel and glances at the sleeping Peggy. Just then, police sirens are heard outside. The local police have finally arrived. The professor and Peggy feel as if they've returned from another world. They give their statements outside while an officer goes in to check the hotel. The officer emerges looking shaken, having never seen such a gruesome scene. Another officer asks if they are the only two survivors. Peggy quickly confirms this, but in the distance, on the roof of the hotel, a full bull-horned killer costume lies hidden. It seems the other killer is not dead after all. The professor and Peggy become the only two survivors of the massacre. They blame everything on the deceased killer couple, and the police quickly close the case. But the survivors' lives are turned upside down. The professor becomes a celebrity at his university, his classes overflowing with students. However, most of them are there to gossip about the murders, not to learn. The constant attention becomes a nuisance for the professor. Peggy's situation is the opposite. The renewed public interest in the hotel murders has revived her career. She lands the lead role in a new movie playing Catherine, one of the victims from the original murders 30 years ago. The film is a sequel to her breakout role and generates massive buzz before filming even begins. As the movie's popularity grows, Peggy feels she is on the verge of a comeback and throws herself into the role with incredible passion. The director is so pleased with her performance that he agrees to any changes she suggests. Just as filming is about to wrap, Peggy receives a bouquet of flowers from the professor. That evening, the professor visits her with a bottle of wine. Having survived the hotel together, their bond is stronger than that of ordinary friends, but Peggy's busy filming schedule has kept them apart. She excitedly invites him to be her date for the movie's premiere. The professor seems to have something on his mind and doesn't immediately respond, instead listening quietly as Peggy boasts. She explains that the film is planned as a trilogy, and the director has promised her the lead role in all three. The movie is called The Final Girl, telling the story of the last victim, Catherine. Only after dinner does Peggy stop talking about the movie and ask about the professor. He tells her his chances of getting his doctorate are slim, as the university doesn't care that he survived a massacre. Inevitably, their conversation turns to their near-death experience. The professor admits he feels some things are still unresolved, especially the RV man's dying words. He also believes there was more than one killer at the hotel besides the couple. After all, the RV man was old and his wife was a woman. He doubts they had the strength to kill everyone. But Peggy is convinced there was no third killer. She breaks down each victim's death, pointing out that almost no one was killed in a direct confrontation. The chef was trapped in a sauna, and the RV lady was closest to the artist, giving her the perfect opportunity for a sneak attack. Even the psychic and Blake were attacked when they were extremely vulnerable. The professor frowns, conceding that her points are valid. Brute force wasn't necessary for those kills. But he has another lingering doubt, and he takes this opportunity to voice it. He tells her that when he woke up in her room that day, he saw a heart hidden in the ceiling, just like the offering the RV man mentioned. Peggy feigns surprise and says she knows nothing about it, guessing the RV couple planted it there to frame her, just as they did with the grimoire in his room. The professor agrees that it's possible and apologizes for doubting her. Peggy nods, touched that he never told the police. She then asks him a soul-searching question. If she really were the killer, would he still protect her? The professor instinctively nods. Their relationship quickly heats up and they fall into bed for a juicy kiss together. Afterwards, Peggy smiles, content. She has it all now, love and a thriving career. She muses that they survived because they were on the same side from the start. The professor agrees to attend her premiere, but he has one question. Since her character, Catherine, is killed in the first movie, how will she appear in the sequel? Peggy proudly announces that the next film might be about Catherine's daughter, an idea she herself pitched to the director. The professor's expression changes slightly. He has researched Catherine extensively and knows that while she had 2 husbands, she never had a daughter. Peggy is unconcerned, remarking that as long as it sells tickets, who cares about the details? The night of the premiere arrives. The director is on stage announcing that The Final Girl will be a trilogy. Amidst applause, Peggy joins him. She is radiant, declaring that she has become one with the character of Catherine and promises an even more spectacular performance in the next 2 films. But then the director grabs the microphone and makes a surprise announcement. Catherine has a long-lost daughter. Just then, a beautiful young actress walks onto the stage. Peggy's smile freezes. The director had never mentioned a new actress. She had assumed she would play the daughter herself. Awkwardly returning to her seat, she watches the movie begin. To her horror, her character, Catherine, has only a few lines and is beheaded by the bull-horned killer within the first 10 minutes. Unable to watch anymore, Peggy rushes backstage to find the director. She knows the beheading scene must have been filmed with a body double. The professor tries to calm her, but the director appears. Peggy accuses him of being a liar, reminding him of his promise to cast her in all 3 films. The director explains that it was the investors' decision. They wanted a younger, more beautiful lead. Peggy suppresses her rage and coolly tells him to expect a summons from her lawyer. The director, seemingly prepared for this, nods and walks away. The professor tries to comfort her but doesn't know what to say. Peggy finally realizes she is not the final girl. Her acting dreams are shattered. Meanwhile, the movie is nearing its end. All of Peggy's intended scenes now feature the new actress. But just as the film concludes, the screen cuts to real footage. The first image is of the real Catherine, followed by photos of each of the victims from 30 years ago. Then it shows the victims from the recent hotel massacre. Seeing the familiar scenes, the professor immediately knows something is wrong. The director is also surprised and runs backstage where he bumps into Peggy. Both deny arranging this. The director decides to shut off the projector, while the professor says he'll find the light switch. The 3 of them split up. The director reaches the projection booth but finds the door locked. A bright light shines in his eyes, and he feels a cold sensation in his stomach. In the auditorium, the professor and Peggy return to their seats. The screen is still showing images of the victims. Suddenly, the director stumbles onto the stage. The audience thinks it's part of the show until blood spurts from his abdomen. They realize it's real and flee in a panic. Only Peggy and the professor remain, staring in horror. The scene is all too familiar. They wonder if the bull-horned killer has returned. But Peggy quickly realizes that besides herself, only the professor went backstage. He is the most likely suspect. The professor's face hardens. He asks if she's accusing him, then retorts that he thinks she did it. The facade is gone. They begin to furiously voice their suspicions of each other, revealing they never truly trusted one another. The professor accuses Peggy of killing everyone at the hotel just to gain fame. When that plan backfired and the director didn't make her the star, she killed him out of spite. Peggy retorts without hesitation. She noticed during the movie that every time Catherine appeared on screen, the professor's breathing would quicken. She suspects he has a pathological obsession with Catherine. The professor doesn't deny it. He had researched Catherine extensively for his dissertation and had become captivated by her. Recalling their conversation from the previous night, Peggy deduces that the professor was enraged by the director's careless portrayal of Catherine and killed him for it. Their argument escalates. The professor claims Peggy's performance was an insult to Catherine's memory. Peggy declares with certainty that he is in love with Catherine, which is why he killed all those innocent people at the hotel whose presence disturbed her spirit. The professor doesn't admit to this, still insisting Peggy is the killer. Consumed by rage, Peggy grabs a dagger from the floor and stabs him. Seeing the professor collapse, she realizes what a terrible mistake she has made. As he lies dying, the professor continues to accuse her, saying her sensationalized performance made audiences think Catherine was just a stupid, sexy woman. At that moment, police officers burst in. As Peggy is about to drop the dagger, the professor screams that Peggy's trying to kill him and she's the real killer from the hotel. The police believe him and open fire. Peggy falls in a hail of bullets. A smirk plays on the professor's lips as he says she is the final girl. With her last breath, Peggy tells him she will see him in hell. The scene cuts to a young actress at an audition. The role she is trying for is the new generation's villainous Peggy. It seems the public has accepted her as the hidden killer. But is that the real truth? We must not forget that the professor is good at criminal psychology, a master of manipulation. In the end, while the film seemingly reveals the killer's identity, it leaves a trail of clues that invites the audience to overturn that conclusion. It is undeniably a truly unexpected ending. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.